So the Met Police have just come out and admitted there is two-tier policing, which we always knew, and they've admitted that they're going to make it even worse. Now, if you don't know what I'm referring to, it's their truly anti-racist action plan that they've published in the last 2 days, which, the short version, before I get into some of the quotes and drive you all mad, is that we're going to be paying increasing amounts of money as British taxpayers to set up diversity and inclusion inquisition panels to ensure that every Met Police officer is sufficiently brainwashed with the current thing, and if you make a single off-colour joke, in the most literal sense of the term, you will be sacked, and there are incentives for your peers to dob you in for promotions.
That's true. So to get to the rank of inspector, you've got to have reported one of your colleagues for something, which is not good for building camaraderie, is it? If you've got to be a grass. And I don't think people want to work with people like that. Even when I was a young child, snitches get stitches was a prescient phrase, and it's only aged like fine wine.
Now they get promoted.
That's
because they're promoting the diversity thing.
Yep, and they're going to be even more encouraged to do so. But before we get into that, if you want something made by competent people, we are selling Islander at the moment. Remember, if you're on YouTube, we actually don't have any YouTube monetization. So in order to keep the lights on, you can subscribe to lotuseaters.com for as little as £5 a month to get all the fantastic content we do behind the paywall, including my show on a Wednesday. But also, we sell physical magazines. It's quarterly. Rory puts a fantastic amount of work into all of the art that you see on the cover and inside. It's £15. They send them according to batches. The first batch has been printed, so it should be shipped to you if you've already ordered within 2 or 3 weeks. I think it only runs for another 3-ish weeks, so get it while you can, because it won't be reprinted, and it has fantastic essays in there from Charles Cornishdale, Stefan Molyneux, our very own Carl, and even some poetry from this fella right here. So,
who?
Never should have come here. Anyway, go and pick that up. But let's get into it. So, Mark Rowley, the demented little dwarf that is heading up the Met Police.
He was the guy who just threw away the microphone. Yeah.
Yes.
Very resentful.
Yes.
Didn't give good vibes.
No. He's a deeply petty man. Essentially, for those who don't remember, I think it was a Sky News journalist of all people, put out his microphone as Mark Rowley walked out of a contentious Cobra meeting with a very upset Keir Starmer and said, "Are we going to end two-tier policing, sir?" And he smacked the microphone out of the reporter's hand and then insisted that he didn't do that, and then also suggested he might extradite Elon Musk for allowing people on X to spread misinformation.
That's very, very embarrassing.
Yeah,
both domestically and internationally for the Met Police, isn't it?
Strangely, really pathetic short people run London. So we had Cressida Dick, Mark Rowley, Sadiq Khan, just fundamentally unimpressive people run my capital city, and you can tell. But anyway, Mark Rowley, this was an article in the BBC, the sort of state propagandist mouthpiece, and there was a few quotes in here I thought I'd pull out before I read through the actual report myself, because you guys don't have time to read these reports. There's nothing else I love doing more than reading a really boring report and telling you what all our money's going to be spent on. Anyway, so the aim is for the Met to become a, quote, truly anti-racist and inclusive organisation, according to Sir Mark Rowley. Remember, he's a Knight of the Realm. And he said, "Black Londoners have been let down by the Met over many years, and while we continue to take steps in the right direction, there remains a long way to go and there is more work to do. Action, not words, will rebuild trust in our service, so we must now remain focused on delivering real change that is seen and felt by our communities and our workforce." Stelis, would you like to come in before you punch me?
No, I don't want to punch you. No, I don't want to punch you. But you see, I get particularly frustrated when I hear people having this rhetoric, because it reminds me a lot of people in the university, and it's people who constantly want to virtue signal. They think that their bottom is safe, and they want to play nice with other people's jobs. So he doesn't look to me to be someone who would be a diversity hire when he was hired. But now he wants to talk about diversity hire and make a truly anti-racist police.
So to pull up the ladder after.
How about resigning, if you actually believe in all these things, resigning and giving your position to someone else you think requires more representation? Just how about that?
Have you considered he's basically one of the many philosopher kings stewarding us into the progressive utopia, and therefore he's okay?
He's a policing Peter Dinklage, isn't he? Because in the same way that Peter Dinklage said he didn't want any more dwarf actors after he became a dwarf actor, he doesn't want any more white police officers or male police officers after he's already got to the top.
Well, he says exactly that. He says the Met want to better represent the communities it serves and is working to recruit to retain a more diverse workforce, aka only black people should be policed by black people, apparently, according to the Met. All new recruits are being trained to understand the experience of black Londoners and other communities across the capital, according to the Met. Remember, by the way, communities is a dog whistle term for non-white and religious minorities in Britain that the government have imported. But if you complain about that and you notice that there are ethnic distinctions, you're far right and a racist. Tensions over stop and search have included the treatment of 2 black athletes, Team GB runner Bianca Williams and her partner Portuguese sprinter Ricardo dos Santos. 2 Met constables were sacked in October 2023 after a disciplinary panel found their actions during a highly distressing stop and search amounted to gross misconduct. And another one that's mentioned here, which I want to bring up, is a 15-year-old black girl called Child Q strip searched while on her period at a school in Hackney in 2020. Now, the child's mother has claimed that she was strip searched because of her race and sex. They were looking for drugs and found none. It was obviously very traumatizing for the child. The problem is she was strip searched by 2 female officers. So why would they profile her for her sex?
It's strange, isn't it? It's almost like they're trying to pull a grievance out of their behinds, isn't it?
Yeah, they're trying to crowbar intersectionality in there where it isn't. Also, if you were going to profile people based on, let's say, levels of criminality in the capital, it would be black men, because they commit the overwhelming number of the stabbings. But we're not allowed to notice that either, because that's also racism. No, it's only due to discrimination. And so here's a example. So we've got the report here. I think we've got it open. Fantastic. I'm just going to scroll down and read some quotes from it and see what you make of it, gents. Now, the main quote that I pulled out here was something that Harry Miller discussed with me when we last did Deprogrammed for New Culture Forum, which you should watch. There's some great insights. And they quote it in here from Sir Robert Peel, who founded the British Police. In 1829, when he established the Metropolitan Police Act, he said, "The police are the public and the public are the police." Now, what that has been taken to mean in the present day is that there is no hierarchical arrangement between the police and the public. They are on essentially the same level, except the police are in possession of this new orthodoxy, and so they can reciprocally indoctrinate the public if they reflect the public. Therefore, they have to impose a new ideology on the public until the public and the police are saying the same thing. So rather than the police being at the service of the public, the police essentially just have to brainwash the public by policing thoughts.
Or there's in addition to this, there is a different conception of who the public is. There's a different conception of who us are and who they are.
You do see this, actually, because when people talk about particularly the right, they say, well, they aren't truly British, or they don't represent us. So they're trying to pick and choose who is actually British rather than representing, everyone.
And people on the left do this.
Of course, yeah.
They're trying to ideologically redefine Britishness as a set of values which are multicultural, liberal, pluralistic. And so if you don't assent to this new post-Blair redefinition of British identity, you are outside the box of British identity. Yeah. You're far right. And it's actually
a xenomorph.
Yeah, well, it's your racism, right? It's your noticing differences, which is causing the new minorities that are imported into London to commit crime in the first place. Because if they were just felt welcome, they'd be as British as you and me and wouldn't go and stab each other with machetes. But there you go.
Well, I've not felt welcome before. I've not stabbed anyone.
No.
Normally, I just leave.
Well, curiously, the Sikhs and the Boy Scouts carry knives all the time, and they manage not to break out into duels. I wonder if it's something to do with culture there. So, in New Met for London, the Met Police set out their commitment to renew a culture of policing by consent, become anti-racist, and build a Met that is inclusive, diverse, and representative of the city we serve. Through this London Race Action Plan, a thing that I'm actually having to read out, and a critical part of our accompanying culture plan, we are underlining the commitment to tackle racism in all its forms. This plan is specifically and deliberately focused on our black communities, capitalised B there, acknowledging the history and the trust deficit, but there will be benefit for all in the service they receive from the Met. London is one of the most diverse cities in the world. Yeah, that's the problem. The diversity gives the city its depth and breadth, its character, its heartbeat. We will only succeed if we have a Met where we can all thrive, freely contribute, and know that we'll be treated fairly. But London is also an unequal city, and black communities in particular face barriers in education and employment, homelessness, criminal justice, and mental health, as recognised by the Mayor and City Hall's Equality, Diversity and Inclusion strategy. They're disproportionately more likely to be victims of crime, which ought to be of deep concern to all parts in civil society. Black men are 13 times more likely to be murdered than their white counterparts, and black women are 66% more likely to be reported as victims of domestic abuse, and it's a scandal that needs urgent attention.
By who?
Who's committing the crimes, Mark?
Wasn't it an actual majority of violent crime is committed by black Londoners, which represent 14% of the population of London? So I think it was 14, and I think, 63% of gun crime? I can't remember the exact figures, but it's a significant portion.
Well, ethnic minorities in the UK are vastly overrepresented in robberies, sexual offences and stabbings.
And contrary to what people believe, this is logically possible and
Yes.
logistically possible.
We'll get Tariq Nasheed on the case, I'm very sure. They also say diversity strengthens organisations and is particularly essential in public services. Oh, all of those that are being run so wonderfully right
Yeah,
now.
you know why, Connor? Because you have diversity of competent people and also incompetent people. You need incompetent people.
Yeah, not anymore. We don't have any competent people there at all, do we? What they mean, diversity, again, is one of these buzzwords. Just substitute it for non-white. Because that's what they mean. So they're saying non-whiteness strengthens organisations and is particularly essential in public services. So this plan, along with many other government plans, especially ones by Sadiq Khan, is to just South Africanise the UK. So that's what this is going to be. This is going to be policing according to racial lines.
So what I've sort of heard is that if we are policed by lesbian, Islamic, black amputees, there'll be no problems. The policing will be perfect.
It will be perfect for those constituent groups. It'll be really bad for, the law-abiding indigenous population who might get a bit upset at a protest and say something a bit naughty that they probably shouldn't have done, but then they'll get longer sentences than actual sex offenders. But don't worry, no tier justice here. They also say, we fully recognise that our plan will not go fast enough. We're committed to becoming an anti-racist, pro-inclusive organisation, and we recognise the need to evolve our communities throughout. So they're fully hooked up to the ideology.
Means anti-white.
Yeah, it's just the ideology dialysis machine. Like this is all of our institutions on life support, and they're just constantly pumping like mental morphine through themselves. So they say here's some outlines about what they're going to do. Our Positive Steps mentoring network has supported 1,500 ethnic minority officers and staff, and has been recognised as best practice by the College of Policing, who are currently policing more thought crimes than they are actual burglaries. Since 2021, positive action workshops for black officers have seen pass rates for promotion increase from 68 to 75%. Since 2021, all new police officer recruits receive community-centred training, including inputs to improve cultural awareness informed by the lived experiences of members of the black community. Okay, to boil that down, they're by fiat increasing the number of non-whites in executive positions. They've already been brainwashed with sort of critical race theory style ideology that blames all shortcomings of various non-whites in the UK on a conspiracy of racism by the white majority. And now all the new recruits, white or otherwise, are going to be taught this ideology too, so they're going to be policing along those lines.
There is also another dimension to this, that in order to pursue these racial quotas, basically, they're lowering the standards to such a degree that the people they're recruiting are mentally incapable, and sometimes physically incapable as well, of doing the job of policing.
They've also reduced the English language requirements, as far as I'm aware.
Mm-hmm. Which I feel like you've got to have a good comprehension of the English language, because actually it's what the laws are written in. And if you're going to enforce the law, you need to be able to read what the law is.
But the major concern and the major goal of the police, as well as the state, the first and foremost, is ensuring public safety. The very idea that people can do this and this not affecting public safety is just ridiculous. You need to be stupid to believe this.
Yeah, but as
there's always a question of whether they care.
They carry out their client groups, and again, they're committed to this mad idea that human nature is just a product of economic and educational circumstances, and so all they need to do is censor people pointing out cultural differences, and then there will be no cultural differences, and then all crime will stop.
Yeah, I mean, you say this, and I agree up to a point, but I don't know one thing about this. So they can't ensure the public safety of their client groups because their client groups are directly incompatible.
Yeah, but they think the incompatibilities are because of the existence of the host population.
Exactly. Yeah, that's true. So what they do is they react with a rhetoric that demonizes yet again the native population.
Yes.
But that doesn't address the issue of how to police these communities within them. And they won't. And essentially what happens is that they will progressively turn their backs towards some of those communities and will just end up siding with a dominant of those clients.
They're basically like a doctor whose prescription for a drowning victim is more water. They're making the problem far worse.
Yeah.
Little do they know that what they're doing is the source of the problem.
Yeah, well, they think this is just the sort of birthing pains of a utopia. So they're kind of apathetic about whether or not a few more black kids get stabbed by other black kids, because they think if they just crush the far right, no black kids will stab each other at all. It's not like there's ever been tribal conflict in Africa before we showed up or anything.
Or they just care about how to handle it from a communicative aspect.
As in,
This goes to a debate whether they're actual humanitarians or not. I'm willing to think they're more Machiavellians. It seems you think they're true believers.
I think they're true believers because they're too stupid to be the savvy.
I mean, being Machiavellian doesn't mean that you're necessarily smart.
You have to be a bit crafty to re-engineer all of society, but I do think they truly believe in this sort of we're all equal deep down human nature BS. But
I love this disagreement we have about it, because it's really rich.
I think so. I just think that they're fully hooked up to ideology at this point, per this sort of stuff. So the Met have committed to trialling a new approach to deployment and briefing, which seeks to recognise and address drivers of disparity in policing areas with a higher proportion of ethnic minorities. Basically, the only police presence in these communities, ethnic enclaves, is going to be people from there. So they're the most likely to apply the law in a very partisan fashion.
So infinity grooming gangs in London, basically.
Could be an outcome, given what I covered with the Rotherham trial, where the families themselves knew about the grooming committed by their own family members and said nothing, and still showed up to the trial saying, "I love you, Dad." Very gross. Establish a culture and diversity youth advisory panel. So a bunch of brainwashed young leftists are going to tell the police how to police things. A culture, diversity and inclusion shadow board of more junior officers and staff has been set up. The board examines new approaches, checks and tests thinking and practice, tests thinking, and ensures that these will be both operationally viable and well received across the organisation. Recently, this has included reviewing the London Race Action Plan and challenging the support available to those actively calling out poor behaviour. So they're increasing support for people that complain about microaggressions from colleagues with the additional incentives of getting promotions. Because they say, promote reporting by staff and officers of any racist behaviour and victimisation, and encourage use of our anonymous reporting mechanisms when preferred, and continue workshops to eliminate victim-blaming language. So they've predefined you as a victim if you complain. You don't need to provide any evidence, and if you contest the fact that they are claiming to be a victim, you are victim blaming and to be censored. We see the exact same thing from the non-crime hate incidents, because if you file a non-crime hate incident, you're anonymised, you're defined a victim, and this black mark against someone's reputation, which can show up on a DBS check and prevent them from getting a job, is put there without any evidence ever been needed. And they came straight from 2014, after the Met Police, after a long period of consultation, adopted the findings of the Macpherson report, which is what originally decreed the Met Police, without any evidence, by the way, being institutionally racist.
I mean, just what a train wreck. Just looking at someone's accusation and treat it as sacrosanct testimony.
This is why I think they're true believers, because they're operating basically like Soviet Politburo now. I mean, some of them ran a very strict regime to imprison their political enemies, and it was very expedient for them. But there were people that Solzhenitsyn details as being imprisoned in the gulags that were members of the Soviet Party, that even after they had been imprisoned, they knew they were innocent, and by pure ideology alone, swore to their guilt under false pretenses. I think some of these people are really brainwashed.
Well, let's remember that when the Soviets rounded up all the kulaks for being class traitors, they starved. So there is that.
Yeah. Better be careful how they decide to police along racial lines.
I think, though, that there are two tiers, because you have the true believers, but you also have the those calling the shots who really use this as a very powerful weapon, and it is an effective weapon, because essentially what is going on is that they're destroying the rule of law. They're after the rule of law by subjectivizing legislation, and they are subjectivizing legislation by introducing the notion of psychological harm. And they're expanding what counts as psychological harm. So they have said that we are introducing such a system, we're creating such a status quo, where the accusation itself is evidence that the person who accuses is psychologically harmed, because if he weren't psychologically harmed, or if she weren't, they wouldn't accuse. So I think that it's a very smart system. It's a very immoral system, but a very smart system that not a stupid one would ponder.
So I think, to hash this out, I think both factors are at play here in the characters of Mark Rowley, who obviously wants to pull the ladder up after him because he's a white guy at the top of his profession and feels very insecure about it. Otherwise, he wouldn't have smacked the microphone out of his hand. But then there's also characters like Sadiq Khan who have signed on to this. Sadiq Khan has clear anti-white grievances. He's just an anti-white racist. And so I think both people are at play here.
Yeah, but Sadiq Khan also is the one of the chief champions of the ULEZ laws and used 2 Range Rovers to go to Liverpool.
Oh yeah, he's a deep.
I don't know exactly if he's a true believer himself.
I think he's definitely a true believer about how all white people are racist and therefore he resents them. I think he uses the prevailing paradigm to also give himself advantages. But there you go. The only commitments I would agree with here, and it's funny you mentioned the grooming gangs, is this. There's 2. Number 1, the Met intend to target offenders who perpetrate offences which disproportionately impact members of our black communities, using the full range of policing interventions, which include safeguarding and diversion to help break the cycle of offending. Now, I'm not a fan of directly policing according to race, but were they to honestly look at the perpetrators of crimes against black people, they would come up with, well, it wouldn't be all that pasty, let's be fair.
Well, yeah. It's a well-known phenomenon that most crimes are committed within racial groups, right? There are some that disproportionately target other groups, sure.
Like blacks to Asians in America.
And blacks to whites.
And blacks to Jews.
And, yeah, you get the gist. But, yeah, it's going to be a lot of black people getting arrested if they're protecting other black people.
But I don't think they mean that.
No, they don't.
I think they mean hurt your feelings.
They do.
Yes. And then the other one, which was interesting, and I was surprised to find this in here. Carry on using specialist resources to identify and target the most serious, violent and sexual offenders and those who pose the greatest risk to women and girls. Now, if you were being honest about this would lead to a crackdown on the grooming gangs, because even under complete professional useless person Rishi Sunak, they established a grooming gang task force, thanks to Suella Braverman, and found at least 4,000 victims and 1,500 perpetrators. And those cases are all hopefully proceeding. 7 of them were convicted very recently, thanks to Charlie Peters' work, which I covered last week. However, the moment that the stats start looking a little bit diverse, those are going to be buried. They're going to be thrown under the bus. And that 2020 Home Office report stat that obviously The Guardian and the like ran, saying, well, white people are responsible for the overwhelming majority of sexual offences. It's like,
per capita.
Now do per capita, and now do the specific crime of gang-related child sexual grooming, and then you come up with some very indicting statistics about the Pakistani community. But there you go. And we all know this will happen, this sort of statistics being buried, because we've got a foreshadowing of it here. Quote, continue our work to protect migrant communities by working closely with key stakeholders to obtain and review available data so we can take an evidence-based approach and design interventions including joint training with migrant hotels to spot exploitation. Did you catch that at the end?
I did, yeah.
Migrant hotels spot exploitation. So, it's not that they have broken the law by breaking into the country. It's not that they are committing criminal acts by dealing drugs and working in the cash-only dark economy with Deliveroo. It's that the poor, beset upon asylum seekers are somehow being coerced into crime by the native population. So we need to intercede in that relationship and stop them falling afoul of the epidemic of British crime.
And this is one of the reasons why in Europe it isn't illegal to share crime statistics when it comes to the various groups, ethnic groups, because the establishment allows them being published, but also tries to steer the narrative that interprets them as being solely economic at nature. Why? Because the punchline is, we need to tax you more, native people, because that's the only way. This is an economic problem. We'll get money from you. We will give it to them, and eventually it will stop. It will stop.
Yeah, because
and so long as they carry on engaging in crime, it's solely because they haven't had enough of money.
Yeah.
Well, the economic explanation as well just doesn't work, because on average the ethnic groups that are most likely to be in poverty are Bangladeshi and Pakistani. And they're not the most likely to commit violent crimes, for example. That's not
other than of a sexual nature.
Yes, they're overrepresented there, but other groups that are less deprived actually commit violent crime more.
But also, if you take the City of London out of the GDP per capita calculations in the UK, the rest of the UK is collectively poorer than every single other US state, but the rates of violent crime are the highest in London among a particular demographic. Mm-hmm. So it's not necessarily poverty, because otherwise all throughout English history we'd be having the same number of stabbings and acid attacks as Sub-Saharan Africa, but we don't. It just so happens that when you import loads of Sub-Saharan Africans, you get Sub-Saharan Africa. And also, it's funny you bring up the Europe stat. Yes, it's because they believe that there's an infinitely fungible human nature that can just be remedied by turning the economic dials. But at least they publish theirs. And we don't publish ours. Centre for Migration Control has decided to do some freedom of information requests and found that migrants are 34% more likely to be arrested than British nationals. This was from 26 police forces. They've collated the data in 2023, and that the rate for British nationals being arrested is 1 in 94. The rate for migrants being arrested is 1 in 70. And they found that 369,000 arrests of non-UK nationals took place last year. That's 19% of the total arrests. And that's exceeding the, let's say, 16% in the census data that says that Britain is a migrant population. It's probably on parity now. And this isn't also counting, obviously, all of the border interceptions from illegals that are met, which would add another 40,000.
There are also lots of cases of people not being caught. And if you belong to a community whereby they don't cooperate with the police, that's going to push down the number as well. So I imagine they're even more overrepresented than that figure suggests.
And that figure is going to be driven down thanks to the Met's new London Race Action Report, because the entire purpose of the report is to protect non-whites, religious minorities, and people with a migrant heritage from ensuring that you have outlier statistics like this, which look like the Met Police are institutionally racist, which they've already been defined of ahead of time. So I'm just going to wrap this segment up with you're going to be paying for this. You're going to be paying for the Met Police to sit behind a comfy desk all day with a tea and biscuits, monitoring your Twitter feed for offensive posts. Meanwhile, non-white criminals and migrant criminals can just have free roam because the police just don't care because they don't want to be called racist.
I hope you appreciated that segment from the podcast The Lotus Eaters, and if you want to see what else we're putting out, you can follow Connor's series, Tomlinson Talks, where he talks to lots of interesting guests, this time with Katie Faust. And if you want to see what else we're putting out, you can follow us on Twitter. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.